We are live.
Hello.
You know, you don't feel so excited that you're live until it really doesn't work for you when you want it to be.
Yeah, that was like not fun Tuesday night.
No. Okay, so Dr. Koslowitz, do you have the questions open in front of you?
I do, but it's probably easier if you read them just because
I'm going to try to find them here, but I'm on a different computer and the file is not being so nice to me right now. Okay, thank you, Annette. Thank you to my favorite ladies. So many nice people are joining us here. I'm so excited. The questions are hard, Dr. K. I just finished telling people that I'm so excited that you're the one answering this and not me. I can't wait to hear some of this stuff.
So first of all, I just want to say something. Annette, do you recognize my shirt? So it's my empty shirt that I'm living in these days because
we can't see your shirt. That's not.
You can't see my shirt. I'll stand up. This is my shirt. I'm living in this shirt because it's comfortable, and I like it.
Wonderful. Okay, so I just gave by way of introduction that some of the questions that came in were not so much new problems as much as they're an exacerbation of a previous relationship issue. So, you know, you take the intro. I'm going to try to get the file open while you give your intro.
Okay, great. I'm just moving my tripod over a little bit because things are a little strange over here. Okay, so I see I'm slightly sideways. So first of all, I just want to give a disclaimer. I have a lot of followers who are not members of the Orthodox Jewish community. A lot of what we're going to be talking about today, like, sort of transcends between two things. We're going to be talking about dealing with really difficult, complex family dynamics during coronavirus, right, which I think is universal to a lot of us. But we're also going to be talking about certain things that are very unique to the Orthodox Jewish community. So if you want to stick around and, you know, benefit from the parts you can benefit from, great. If you want to, you know, message me asking for a translation of some words that we might throw in some Yiddish words here or there, you know, no problem. But just wanted to give that disclaimer so everybody knows that. And there's one other disclaimer that I want to give. I was sitting and really looking over the questions before, and I want to say something that I think is always true, but is especially true now. Every single thing I am going to say is
Dr. Koslowitz, I'm just pausing for a second. People are saying that you look very fuzzy. I actually also see you a little bit fuzzy.
That's funny. Let me see if I can fix that. I just wonder if I'm
not. We hear you perfectly fine.
Right. I don't know. It doesn't look fuzzy on my phone, but who knows?
Just like clean off your camera for a second, the front camera maybe.
Let me see if that helps. Although my camera basically lives in my drawer except for Instagram, so it should be just fine. This particular camera is my Instagram only camera. Is that helping?
Okay, much better.
Okay, great. Okay.
Okay, go.
So I just want to say that what I am going to say, and I think this is something that you see, that patients say to me all the time, and it's very true. Everything I'm going to say tonight is easier said than done. It's one thing to say what we should or shouldn't do when we're dealing with crazily difficult life situations. It's another thing. It's another thing entirely to actually do it. I actually wrote a Psychology Today blog post today about how coronavirus gives us insight into what the lived experience of OCD is like. Like, now you know what my patients go through, right? Like, this is what it feels like to have coronavirus, to have OCD, right? Like one night I really had that experience where, you know, my mother lives with me. She's elderly. She's in a wheelchair. She has compromised lung function. So we're being extra careful and taking a lot of precautions. I was on the phone with somebody who was dealing with a crisis, and I was concentrating very hard on the call, and I was washing my hands, and I washed my hands. And then I thought, wait a minute, did I wash my hands long enough? Did I wash between my fingers? Did I wash off my nails? So I washed my hands again. And then later that night I said, this is so funny. This is like making me think of OCD. And I watched the surveillance camera of my kitchen. I washed my hands thoroughly 3 times. And I didn't register it because I was talking to this person, and I just didn't register it and that's what it's like to have OCD. It gave me such insight. And in that article, one of the things I wrote, like I said, it's my newest Psychology Today blog post. One of the things I said in that article is the reason for that is something called the hot-cold empathy gap. Meaning, it's something that a psychologist named George Lowenstein developed way back in like the 70s, where when we're in a cold, calm, regular state, we can always say the smartest thing to do in any situation. Yeah, so if somebody hurts my feelings, I'm going to remember that hurt people, and I'm going to take a deep breath, I'm going to answer them nicely, and it's going to be fine. My kids are being really annoying, and I'll calmly tell them, right, it's going to be great, right? And that's how I'm going to handle things. Then when we're actually in a hot state, and we're so upset at that person, and we're so triggered by what they say, and we're furious, then we end up going back to those old patterns. And whether that's, I'm going to control my temper with someone. I'm not going to fall for my sister-in-law's like snarky line. I'm not going to say anything back to her to show her that she hurt me. I'm not going to eat that treat because I decided that I'm committing to healthy eating, whatever it is. And you know what ends up happening? We yell at that person, we fall for it, we eat that cake, right? Because hot and cold are two different things. That's why in therapy, sometimes we have to put people into hot states, not because we're mean and because we want to torture people and because we don't like people, but because the only way to, like if someone's having panic attacks, the only way I can ever help you with your panic attack is to trigger a panic attack. If you're not going to have a panic attack in my office, I can't help you. As mean as that feels sometimes, it's the way it is. So I just want to say what we're talking now, we're all in cold states, right? We're all sitting here, we're calm, we're in our wisest minds right now. Doesn't mean that you're going to try something I say and it doesn't work, or you're too stressed out and whatever. Doesn't mean you failed, because hot state versus cold state are completely different things. So just remember that, because if you make up like, oh, I'm going to resolve to talk this way, I'm not going to say that, I'm not going to fall for this is not going to happen, and then you do, that's the difference between hot and cold states. So that's my caveat.
That's really important to be mindful of. Okay, we're going to get into the questions. Let me just say that most of the questions were submitted by teens and young adults who've lost a parent.
Right.
This recording is actually going to go onto our YouTube channel. It is also going to go onto our Links hotline.
Okay, great.
Just the audio of it. So some of the answers will be mindful of the fact that teens and young adults do have certain limitations,
right?
Independence-wise and otherwise sometimes, and that may have to be taken into consideration in the answer. So sometimes we'll say, look, if this is a child or a teen, this is their response. Obviously, if you're an adult, you can do it, a little bit differently. Okay, the first question I think, came in different forms, but let's go to that first. Is that, this girl's writing, she says, I don't hate my stepdad anymore, but we found that what has worked for us is actually not having much of a relationship at all, which is easy because we're almost never home at the same time. Keeps us both happier and less agitated. But now he and I are home every single minute of the day, and I'm going out of my mind. Like I'm actually losing it. And on top of that, 5 adults quarantined in what is essentially a 2-bedroom home. Any tips on staying sane? I feel like nobody understands what's going on when you're dealing with a dynamic of somebody who you really can't get along with, and it feels almost claustrophobic to be stuck with this person.
Right. So first of all, I think we got this question in different forms a lot, because I think there's a lot of people coping with step-parent situations, with, having the parent that they had a better relationship with be the one who died, right? Or even a sibling who's coping differently with loss, and now you're cooped up together. And escape is not a bad strategy, right? We tell people to escape all the time. You know what? Don't be around your stepfather all that much. When you're around him, talk about superficialities, right? And do it like that, right? We say things like that to people all the time. Now it's like, sorry, because where exactly are we going to escape to? The bathroom? There's, 50 feet of square feet in this house. What are we doing, mm-hmm. right? So it means we have to come up with strategy and plan B. And like I said, easier said than done, especially when some people, it's not so much what they say, it's that they said it, right? Some people are just triggering. They're just harder to get along with for whatever reason. There's history there. It's sort of like, when they say hello, you're thinking, what do you mean by that, right? There are just people like that. It's nothing wrong with you. It's nothing wrong with them necessarily. It's just the dynamic of that relationship. So if you don't have escape as your strategy, and that was your preferred strategy, good. So you have an opportunity to come up with a plan B. So one of 2 things has to be your plan B. Number 1, you can still escape. You just have to be more creative about how you do it, right? You can put in earbuds and listen to music or listen to speeches. You can go to your room and put on a noise machine, right? You can escape by simply not being as present. Now, it's not so common for a psychologist to suggest dissociation as a coping tool, But sometimes we have to mentally leave a situation if we can't physically leave the situation, like now, right? Now, and there is still the option of slight escape depending on your situation. Obviously, if you're quarantined and you've been told by a doctor to stay in for 2 weeks or whatever, that's different. But you could take a walk around the block by yourself, put in your earbuds, go take a walk, right? You could call a friend on the phone or video chat a friend. Like, you do have options where you don't have to be where that person is. Even if you have to be, even if you're going to get, you know, I think a lot of times in this type of dynamic, other people tend to monitor, you know, our coping strategies. So you might say, you know what, I'm eating a sandwich in my room. I'm not eating lunch with the family right now, right? And then you have a sister who says, oh, you're so antisocial, right? If you know that eating a sandwich in the kitchen around your stepfather who is going to comment about your food or whatever he's going to do is too triggering, and you decided that you want to be elsewhere, your sister's opinion of your coping strategy is simply her opinion. Don't ever worry, especially now during coronavirus, what someone will say about your thing. Oh, but then they'll say I'm antisocial. Let them. Give them permission to say whatever they want. And then give a boundary, a simple boundary, like that's your opinion, right? Or this is where I'm planning on eating my lunch, thank you. And that's it. End of story. Like, that's what you're going to say. Because you can't worry about it, right? You can't people please all the time. You can't just allow people to, you know, tell you how you're coping. I don't think you should do that. Why are you listening to music all the time? You're antisocial, or you're such a downer, or you're such a this, or you're such a that. Okay, you know, I hear that's your opinion, right? That's how you feel. And that's it. And then go do whatever you planned on doing the way you planned on coping. Doesn't mean you can't ever extend yourself. If you have a younger sibling who really wants you to, like, spend some time with her, she's bored, she needs somebody to play with her or whatever. Sometimes, of course, you could extend yourself and support that person. But if you need to eat lunch in your room quietly with your earbuds in because you just can't handle the sound of your stepfather's chewing anymore, then do that. It's much better than exploding and dealing with all of that stuff. And if people want to comment on it, give them permission to, right?
Amazing, amazing. And I love about the creating the space where you need to. Okay. My father died 5 years ago. My mother has diabetes, and I'm absolutely terrified that she will get the virus and die. Like, literally every time she coughs, I envision her dying. How do I stop racing thoughts?
Okay, so a lot in that question. So I'm going to be very honest. I don't know if I'm going to be as wise with this question as I can with some other things, because this is something I'm grappling with too, right? My mother lives with me. She has, you know, multiple health problems that impact her lung function, pretty much every specific, you know, risk factor that there is. She's in a wheelchair. She has poor lung function. She has asthma. She has COPD, right? And so it's very, very scary. So legitimately, it's very scary. It's sometimes hard to get someone out of a maze that you're currently in. And even though I'm continuing with my therapy and I'm processing it, this is very hard. It legitimately is very, very scary, right? Because number one, we can't control the uncontrollable, right? There is a possibility that anybody's parent could die at any time, even the remaining parent, even if we haven't given the world permission to take that parent away from us yet. We can't control the uncontrollable. So, and I think what your brain is trying to do, I'm going from the acceptance and commitment therapy, like, you know, model right now. What your brain is trying to do right now, in acceptance and commitment therapy, we have this thing where your brain is an amazing problem-solving machine, right? So if I said to you right now, if you would be locked inside your house and all of a sudden a fire would break out, what would you do? You would be able to give me a whole scenario of plans of what to do. You'd be like, hey, I would jump out the window, and if the window's blocked, I would go up the steps, I would go down the steps, I would go here, I would go there, I would call the police, I would call the fire. You would come up with a lot of solutions, right? Because our brains exist to do that. They exist to solve problems. They exist to come up with solutions, right? The problem is now your brain is hearing a message of danger, right? It's hearing a fire alarm. So it's coming up with solutions. She's coughing, so look at her really hard and make sure she doesn't cough again. She's coughing, so think very hard about what you should do, right? Like, so your brain is going to be giving you idea and idea and idea because it's trying to help you solve a problem. What you have to say back to your brain, like literally, what I do is I talk to, like, my emotions like they're people. So I literally say to Mr. Fear, like, Mr. Fear, you're 100% right. It's very scary and dangerous right now. And yeah, I really don't want my mother to die. I really don't. At the same token, there is nothing I can do other than the common sense things that I'm doing. There's nothing else I can do. And yeah, is there always that nagging fear that a germ escaped and I didn't clean well enough or whatever? Sure. But there's a limit, right? We have to do what makes sense and maybe a little more than that, and that's it. Because we can't control the uncontrollable. It's horrible to say, right? Because honestly, we've said this at Links the Shabbaton a lot, right? There should be a law. Parents should not be allowed to die, period, end of story. If you're a parent, you should be, you know, immortal, and that's that. That we should pass a law, and that's it. I'm like very anti this parents dying thing. Like, it's not okay, right? It is what it is, though. Parents do die. We didn't, you know, create the world, and we don't understand why it works the way it works. At the same token, though, it is what it is, right? So that's all we can do. But yeah, I agree with you, you know, and I hope your mother is okay, and I hope you all weather it okay, and I hope you weather it with your, you know, emotional health intact. And I hope, if anything, if you can learn how to, like, understand your racing thoughts, the way to stop the racing thoughts is to get off the treadmill, right? Treadmill's going and going and going and going and going. You gotta get off the treadmill, right? You have to say, okay, treadmill, you keep churning. I'm not gonna stay on this treadmill right now because it doesn't work, right? And that's all you can do.
I love that. Okay, next question. I told you they were hard.
Yeah.
My friends think I'm crazy, but I don't get the hype with the virus, meaning I always have drama. So this is just a different drama. I don't even get what people are anxious about. I'm scared to say this out loud, though, because I'll sound like I lost my mind, right? Like, my life's been one long drama, and I think a lot of Lynx girls feel this way, is that they feel like, hey, you've seen nothing yet, world. I've seen this all.
Right.
Right. So there's a piece of them saying, like, I'm almost, another girl explained that she said, I'm almost afraid that I'm disassociating, like, in a pathological way, almost right. Like she said, it's like almost sounds scary, which is why she's scared to say it out loud. Hi, Shush. Okay, go ahead.
So there's two answers to this question, because I think there's two types of people who feel this way. This is either a very, very good thing or a very, very bad thing. Meaning, if you've been through a lot of therapy and you used to be that racing thoughts person, and you used to be that person who tries to control the uncontrollable, and you would make yourself crazy to try to control the uncontrollable, and now you've come to the realization that, like, what's going to happen is going to happen, and I can't control the uncontrollable. And whatever will be, I posted on Instagram a while ago this thing that I just feel so strongly about, that, you know, someone sent me a meme that said, it will be okay. And I just looked at it and I remember thinking, like, but what if it isn't? Who says? People will lose their businesses, right? There are people who will have major financial problems. There are people who will get sick. There are people who will die, right? That we know this, because statistically speaking, it's been happening, right? So you can't really say it will be okay, because not everything is okay. Mommy sometimes die, Tati sometimes die, you know, bad things sometimes happen, and, like, it is what it is. There are bad endings sometimes, right? So it may not be okay, but you will be okay, right? There's a difference, right? Because humans cannot, it's from Daniel Gilbert's research about how humans can't predict what will and won't make them happy, and what they can and can't handle. Humans are good at adjusting to new normal. So you will be okay. So if you're of that mindset, you know, then great. Then that's the mindset you're of, and then that's why you're not attending the drama, because you're like, oh yeah, you know, people who are sitting there going like, oh my gosh, what if someone in my family dies? You're like, yeah, you know what, someone in my family died, and it was terrible, and it was awful, and it kind of was horrible, and you know what, I survived, and I'm okay, and whatever will be, I will be okay. Then great. If you're on the other side, though, if you're emotionally numb and detached and dissociating, that's a very, very, very bad sign. Right? Because if you're just, like, so stressed out and so done with drama in life, that's a very scary place to be. It's scary because you might do risky things just to make it stop, and that's dangerous. You know, I've had a few patients tell me some risky things they're doing where they just need to cope and they don't care. That's number one. Or it's scary because sometimes people who are engaging in self-harm have that dissociated, numb feeling, and that's not a great way to cope with stress now. Especially, you know, I have a patient who cuts herself, and she's like, I'm so worried about the coronavirus that I've been cutting more. And it's like, and it's funny, I haven't seen this girl in years, and she just rejoined therapy, because clearly cutting when there's a contagious, outbreak out there is a really not wise thing to do because you're opening up holes in your skin. So she knows this, and yet suddenly cutting has become her right. She's right back where she was years ago with this. She's better in many ways. That's scary, right? If you're at that stage, if you're that person who's numb and looking to wake yourself up, then it's time to restart therapy. It's time to talk to someone. It's time to face it head on. It's time maybe to start therapy for the first time even, which is like.
Can I just pause on that one for a second? Because I've been getting a lot of questions about that. Most therapists right now aren't taking new clients because they're in compromised states. Most of them are not able to see new clients face to face. They're doing teletherapy in some form or another. And it's like a really weird way to start therapy.
Right.
Would you advise someone who is in a state right now where they could use therapy? I'm not talking about someone who is in a dangerous state, because in that case we say, listen, anything is better than nothing. But if somebody says, oh my gosh, all these relationships right now are all boiling up, and I'm like, I can't deal with all these people in my life. Do they start therapy now, or do we say, when this whole thing's over, don't forget what that felt like and go to therapy?
So it's interesting because I do a lot of supervision with various people, and one of my supervisors is somebody, she's not young, and so she has like, she doesn't understand teletherapy the way someone maybe who's younger, who's familiar more with computers, even though she's somewhat internet literate, but like not, and she did a complete 180. She started by saying like, no one should take on a new client. So she did a complete 180, and she said, look, we don't know how long this is going on. We have to just come up with policies and procedures to take on new patients. So I started taking on new patients now. Actually, the only new patients I won't take on are the people at really active major risk, because I feel like we don't know enough about the risk factors. It's almost impossible to hospitalize someone now. The hospitals are sending people straight home, I know somebody who had a suicide attempt. The hospital pumped her stomach and sent her home. They actually pumped her stomach in a tent in the outside and sent her straight home. Normally that's like a 48-hour psychiatric hold that week. So it's not a time, I'm not comfortable right now taking on someone who's at active suicidal risk or active self-harm risk if I don't know them. But people who are just trying to cope and who are suffering, particularly I have a lot of mothers who always knew they were going to do therapy one day, but like now they're just freaking out for whatever reason. Maybe they have a trauma history, maybe they have a kid with special needs and it's just getting too much, maybe they have health concerns. So I am taking on new patients now after all the paperwork is done. They did just also relax the rules, like you are allowed to see people across state lines, which was not, until now, that was not happening.
Wow.
So things are changing. Yeah, they're letting you see patients across state lines temporarily and every few weeks they change it. We'll see what will be. I think that after coronavirus, they are going to pass the legislation that's going to have like a national certification for psychology, at least psychology. I don't know about other, mental health professions, but, APA has been pushing for it for years. Let's see. But so that's my take on it. I have to do what I think. I have to be as helpful to the world right now as I can. Right. So I think I can't always rely on old rules, but at the same token, any mental health professional listening to this, there's PESI has a training on teletherapy. There's a lot of resources out there. A lot of divisions of APA are, sending out guides of how to do their form of therapy, with teletherapy. Do your due diligence, but I don't know if now is the time to turn people away. Like I said, unless they're at active risk. That's my take on it.
Okay. All right, we're going to fly through some more questions. So a lot of people were asking about how to manage Pesach when being social and getting out and socializing with people is their usual coping strategy. I think we sort of addressed that in the first question a little bit, right? About just unless there was something like a nuanced difference that you wanted to address in that.
Well, I think Pesach is particularly triggering for a lot of us because it is such a family meaningful holiday, right? It's all about family. It's all about Messiah. It's all about, if you lost a father, like there's nobody to lead the Seder, right? Like there's so much about Pesach that's particularly painful. Really, anyhow, right? Any yontif is painful. It doesn't matter which one it is. But Pesach in particular, it's such a family time, and everybody has their family minhagim and the things they do, and it is complicated. It is going to be like expected to be somewhat more triggering. But yeah, now is the opportunity. Ultimately, whenever you have a coping strategy that's outside of the self, it's a little dangerous, because what if you lose that coping strategy? Let's say your coping strategy is, I don't know, shopping. Whenever you're stressed out, you shop, and it helps you like de-stress, and you're a multimillionaire, so that's totally fine. And then, I don't know, the stock market crashes. So it's a little dangerous to have one coping strategy and then only rely on that, because what if that coping strategy is not available to you? Right? It's like kind of like when a kid has one best friend, you say you have to expand your friendship circle a little bit, because like what if your best friend, I don't know, moves, right? Let's have other friends too. Let's widen our circle. Same thing here. It's your opportunity to say, what other coping strategies are there out there? They're not as good as, you know, getting together with my friends and running around with them and whatever, but like, is there a plan B? Is there something I would enjoy somewhat, maybe 85% as much or 70% as much? It's enough to take the edge off. It's enough to get me through. And maybe you reward yourself for using that coping strategy. I know I'm rewarding myself for like making sure to exercise in the morning. Like I'm just rewarding myself because I have no motivation to exercise right now. It's just coronavirus is too scary. I just don't want to. Also, I like to exercise in like group classes, and I can't. So, but I have treadmills, I have ellipticals, I have 2 giant gyms in my house. So I have plenty of like machinery that I could use. So I'm rewarding myself for doing it because it's a coping strategy. I know it will work. It's not my preferred one. I'd much rather go to a gym now. Obviously, that's not going to happen. So I'll go to plan B. And you know what? And you know what I've discovered also, by the way, there are some smart things we can do to de-stress in general, right? Exercise, getting enough sleep, eating healthy. Like those are things that always somewhat lower our adrenaline levels, right? For those people who like music, listening to music, like there are specific things. For me, what lowers my adrenaline levels the way people who play music is doing a visual spatial task. There's actually research that like playing Tetris while talking about traumatic memories is just as effective in some cases as EMDR, which is cute. There's a cute study like that. I don't know if it's like how valid it is, whatever. But I will tell you that after I exercise, I give myself permission to play Tetris for a few minutes, and it resets my brain. It's like when I have too much stress about something, it gives me a second to just like let my racing thoughts unrace, and I can move on from there because it's a visual spatial task. It works, right? The way someone else, one of my kids is a musician, he loves to play. Whenever he gets stressed out, and he's very stressed out right now because it's just stressful, he goes upstairs and plays music, and it completely calms him, and that's great. It's a visual, spatial, and auditory task. A different kid likes to listen to him play because listening to music helps them. I'm tone deaf, listening to music doesn't help me, but
do you not have a child though who says, like, if he plays, I move to another city?
Oh yeah, sure. I'm refereeing World War III all day long with that.
See, here's the problem in most families, and this also touches on some of the questions that we got. Whatever my coping strategy seems to be either offensive or problematic or a trigger for somebody else.
100%.
Right?
100%. And then it's just a matter of negotiation. Like, you have the right not to hear him sing. He has the right to sing. So we're going to have to figure something out. Someone's going to have to
move into my house for a week, please.
It's just like that. One person's, coping strategy is baking. The other person's coping strategy is eating what that person baked. Who said I gave you permission to eat the cookie? Like, it's just never ending with things like that, But
Thank you for that moment of validation.
We're all mothers. Those of us who are mothers know that, when we're around each other in close quarters, as much as we love each other, we also, as much as we can't live without each other, we can't live with each other sometimes. And I think, by the way, any mothers who are on here who are feeling like, oh my gosh, my kids are fighting so much, what is wrong with this family? Nothing, you are normal. Everybody's family. The kids are fighting because that's what kids do when they're around each other.
And by the way, I want to pause that for a second and say that within a traumatic, family unit, I don't know how we call that, but within a family that's suffered from some level of trauma and does have a history maybe of siblings having hurt each other in deeper ways or something of that sort, that's where the normal fighting sometimes is more triggering for a parent. I had actually a Lynx family who the mother mentioned to me that after actually the father passed away, these children were very young, They were separated into different homes, and they really didn't meld well together when they got back.
Right.
It was just part of the story. And now what's happening is they're under the same quarter, and she said she feels like they're regressing by the years, like of what happened years ago.
Right.
Is that the battles that are going are very much territorial for their mother's love and stuff of that
right.
sort. But what we really realized was that for her, this was frightening because the fighting took on a level that seemed to her like what was happening years back, but not necessarily was it so
right.
much so.
I think she has to, right. We have to normalize that for her. Everybody's kids are fighting, right? This is just the way it is. So if your kids aren't fighting right now, I'd be more worried that they're like doing some unnatural, frozen good behavior thing that is maybe not so healthy. Like they're so afraid of losing mommy's love that they're
there are good kids out there.
No, oh sure. I'm talking about that unnatural level of goodness.
I mean, my kids are good kids, but they don't know of this nice stuff.
Right. So one thing also I think you have to do if you're that kind of a mother is sit down with everybody and say, look, guys, ultimately we have a choice. We can manage our mood and be supportive of each other or not. We're going to remember what coronavirus was like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and we're going to have a model for how our family copes with crisis. So let's make a decision. Let's make a plan that we're all managing each other's moods. In my family, we made this kindness contest, and everyone's giving each other kindness points. And my goal is just that everyone should look for the good. Right? Like you can't take away kindness points from a sibling. So if one kid lends another kid his crayons, then the kid who borrowed the crayons gives the kid who lent the crayons a kindness point. If one kid says, that's okay, you can go first, the kid who got to go first gives the kid who said that you can go first a kindness point. But you can't take away kindness points. Nobody can do that because I'm trying to get you to look for the good and to look for how to be supportive of one another. And if you want to know about it, again, it's something I blogged about in Psychology Today, not the most recent one, but the one before. And the kids have to know that, right? Like another thing I'm doing is I'm doing twice a week Dr. K Story Hour on Mondays and Wednesdays at 1:30. And the last book I read the book, The Bad Mood and the Stick, which is about how bad moods are contagious. So we're going to make good moods contagious, right? Rachi's saying that if you devote 100% of your attention to your kids and they fight less, it's true, but you can't always devote 100% of your attention to your kids. I agree with you that sometimes we can do that. And sometimes we can tell our kids, like what you're saying, that it's a midos test. We have this action. We have this opportunity to show Hashem what we're doing. Right? All of that is great. But if sometimes you just want to go take a nap and you're going to wake up to World War III, like, so be it. You have to adjust your own oxygen mask first. I find that I'm like, somewhat hands off with some of the fights. It's just like, guys, we're going to have to work this out and move on. Right? Figure it out and let's go on from there.
Okay, a very deep one and a good one, actually. Somebody asked, when my mother was sick, I was fine. It was after she died that I collapsed. I'm fine now, and I'm worried about collapsing mentally afterwards. Is there any way to prevent that?
Wow, that's a great question.
I think many of us are struggling with some level of that is because we've put in certain coping strategies or what seems like coping strategies to us, and we just kind of wonder, when this is all over, what's that going to look like? When the adrenaline wears off, when that...
Right. Right. A lot of us are good at crisis coping management, and we're good at, like, as long as we don't have to think, we're good at the minute to minute and the day to day, and we're fine, right? I know we both know so many girls who, like, were so quote unquote strong when their mothers were in the hospital and when they were running a house full of like a whole bunch of little children while, their mother was dying. We know a lot of girls like that, right? And a lot of times then people are like, well, a year after your mother died, now you're falling apart, and people don't get it, but that's actually very normal, right? It's very normal to have the anesthetic of shock that during a situation and during a really stressful situation, you're fine. When there's no shock and there's no adrenaline carrying you through and your thoughts start going, all of a sudden it really hits you, right? So it's very normal. What to do about preventing it for the future? So to a certain extent, again, I'm going to go back to ACT, right? That idea that one of the things to do is to not let the adrenaline shut the thoughts off, meaning let yourself have the thoughts. Sit down and ask yourself, what am I thinking now? What am I feeling now? What am I experiencing now? What's going on now? Whether you're going to do that with journaling, whether you're going to do that with writing a letter to your future self, whether you're going to vlog every day just for yourself, you're going to take a little video of your reactions every day, just so that you can store, if your brain is protecting you from allowing your difficult emotions in, you're sort of saying to your brain, you know what, you can let some of it. It's okay. Well, like, think of like a bottle of soda that's like all shaken up, right? We're going to let out the steam a bit at a time so that we don't have a giant explosion when the cap comes off. To a certain extent, you can do that. To a certain extent, you know, and again, maybe you need to be in therapy so that you can get someone to help you go through that and guide you through starting to feel your emotions. And it might feel very threatening. And maybe if you're in that situation where things are so hectic, maybe it's not the time to risk it. Maybe you do need to stay in, like, you know, crisis management mode. You know, I have a friend who has 3 special needs kids who are very hyperactive. She is home with them and trying to manage their needs herself. It's not the time for her to process emotions too much because she can't afford to. It's too dangerous. Like, what's going on in her house is just too scary. But sometimes, you know, it's saying, okay, I'm going to let the lid off this a little bit. I'm going to feel it a little. And sometimes it's not. You're not necessarily going to crash because maybe what happened when you lost your mother was very different than this corona crisis, right? Because when you lost your mother, it was something that you couldn't control at all. It was the worst thing in the world. It was, you know, all of those kinds of things. She's never coming back. Corona crisis is different though, right? Like, the world will return, we hope, and life will go back to normal. And it's not going to be the same type of trauma, right? Not all traumas are the same. So
right. I think there's also something else which I picked up in this question, and I might be off. She has an awareness that this happened. Obviously something, either therapy or her own experiences, gave her the insight that this was not a good scenario.
Right.
And I think that you're walking in with that knowledge into this situation
already
makes for a different reaction. You know, so often you and I will hear from girls, I'm gonna become that again. You're not, because you have that awareness. You will never fully be able to have the same kind of reaction or quote unquote falling apart, as you call it. Now, the other piece that we don't know is what her version of collapsing is. You know, I've heard from so many girls that their version of collapsing is what you and I would call feeling emotions.
Right. Or their version of collapsing is what everyone else would call 85% functionality. Right.
Right. They're in crisis management mode oftentimes, and many of us are, and that requires no emotions usually, right? And then when you start to feel any emotions, which may bring with it some moodiness, some normal anger, some normal sadness, some anything that's within a fairly normal range that's not making you do anything dangerous or stupid, that's not called collapsing. That's called now's the time to feel.
Right.
That's all.
Right, exactly.
So
I agree with you.
I'm 100% sure, right.
No, I agree with you. I think there's a level of insight to the question that I'm already assuming she's in a healthier place than she even realizes she's in. Remember also that surviving PTSD makes us much stronger people, right? Like, we have a certain ability. We know how to cope. We know what to do. We're more, maybe you do. Maybe you say, you know what, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks. Corona crisis is over now. I'm going to give myself 2 weeks to, like, you know, not be fully functional and, you know, and ease into my life slowly. And maybe I'm going to, you know, go back to therapy higher. Maybe I'm going to journal every night. You know, whatever it is, like, give yourself permission that, yeah, I went through something difficult. Like, just like if you ran a marathon, the next day your muscles are going to hurt. You can't be like, what do you mean? What's wrong with me that I have Charlie horse? I run marathons all the time. Yeah, if you run a marathon, your muscles are going to hurt. And you give yourself a few days to recover because that's normal. And a few days might be a few weeks. It might be a few months. But the point is, we need to recover. That's normal. We're human.
Amazing. Okay, this question is a fun one. This girl just texted me twice during our live to make sure that I'm going to get to your question. She's like, I want to hear Dr. Kozlowitz's opinion. And she said she knows that your introduction is going to be that you're not Rebbitzin Koslowitz. So she knows you very well, apparently.
Okay.
I've heard from Rabbanim a lot about this, about it being okay that I don't daven.
Okay.
But I'm curious if you could explain my psychological aversion to davening from a psychological vantage point. Okay. She says, like, Nebuchadnezzar, a friend's mother is sick, and I literally cannot even join to say a parak of Tehillim, like nothing. What does it come from? And is there a quote unquote cure for it? And her last question is, other than religiously, is there any point to trying to fix this? Like, I could technically live my life like this, no?
Technically. Okay, so a couple of things. First of all, I think, again, you're right. I'm going to say, I'm not Robyn Koslowitz. I'm Dr. Koslowitz. I'm not talking to you as somebody who's like, going to give the religious explanation for all this kind of stuff. But I will, from the religious perspective, I will point out that being angry at Hashem and not wanting to talk to him does presuppose that you believe in him, because you're not angry at someone you don't believe in. So if you're like having this panicky thought of like, oh my gosh, am I not a good Beis Yaakov girl? Am I not from anymore? What's wrong with me? You're mad at Hashem, so you believe in him. So, which is the first mitzvah that you have, right? So you're good. So like, I don't like from that perspective, don't worry that it means something big. Right? And yes, you can grow up and be a wife and mother and not out all that often, and many women do, and many women don't think twice about it. And again, it's between you, your rabbi, your God. That's between you. That's your relationship. But in terms of saying, like, I don't want to daven, what's wrong with me? I think that, I'm going to go back to an old story. I've probably said this before, but when I was in NYU, I was in one of these like multidisciplinary like dissertation workshop research things, and one of the participants was doing research on active versus passive coping strategies when people have a child with terminal cancer at Memorial Sloan Kettering, and his statistics were not working, meaning that he posited that people with active coping strategies like researching medications, talking to the doctors, going to therapy, doing mindfulness, whatever it was, were going to do so much better than people with passive coping strategies like just trying to get through day to day and trying to comfort themselves and things like that. So I don't remember what the actual strategies were, but the statistics were not working. So I said to him, at one point, I was listening to this whole thing, and everyone was trying to figure out, I'm not amazing at statistics. I can follow it along. I can do it, but it's not like I was going to be able to figure out like an error in a number somewhere. Like, I don't have that brain to be like, in line 15 of your SPSS printout, there's a transposed digit. That's what, like, that's not me. But I'm listening to him, and I'm listening to him. And all of a sudden I said to him, I'm just curious, do you have any religious people in your population? So he said, yeah, actually, it's a lot of people are religious. I can imagine in Memorial Sloan Kettering's, children's cancer ward, you're going to have a lot of, religious people, whether they're Orthodox Jews, whether they're religious Muslims, whether they're Indian, right? Because it's a diverse community pool. I said, I'm just curious, is prayer an active coping strategy or a passive coping strategy? So in his research, it was a passive coping strategy, prayer. So I said to him, that's so interesting. You're not looking at the mindset of your participants. Because I said, if I was not happy with my grade on this class and I went to the dean to complain, would that be an active or passive coping strategy? So he said, active, right? You're doing something about your problem. So I said, right. If someone's religious and they pray to God, that's an active coping strategy because they're talking to the person who could solve their problem, so to speak, right? He's like, oh my gosh. And so once he controlled for religiosity, meaning he put for the religious people, he put prayer as an active coping strategy, his statistics fell into place. So amazing. The fact that you can't daven, sure, you asked Hashem for something, he said no, so you don't ask him again, right? Like psychologically, it makes a lot of sense, right? Now, also, there are some of us who don't, davening is just not the thing that speaks, right? Some people are too ADHD to daven. Some people never were comfortable with Hebrew. Some people have bad memories of teachers making fun of them davening, right? There are all those things. That doesn't preclude you speaking to Hashem all day long if you want to. So maybe you can't daven. Maybe opening a siddur is too hard. But you can talk to Hashem. You can tell him what you're feeling. You can write him a letter. You can send him a voice note. You can do whatever you want, right? You can always, just because you're not opening a siddur and davening exactly the way you daven in, Mora Kohn's 5th grade classroom, does not mean that you're not talking to Hashem. It doesn't mean that you don't have a relationship with Hashem. In terms of undoing it, if you vet, to a certain extent, I will say that davening is a discipline. Like any other religious discipline, it's a discipline, right? If you were Indian and you were practicing yoga, it would be a discipline, right? The more you practice it, the easier it gets, and the more your brain sort of gets used to it, right? Like any other discipline you can think of. So in that sense, I'm not saying that it's the same thing, by the way, just in case anyone gets offended. What I'm saying is that our brains get used to practicing disciplines, even disciplines that are initially uncomfortable for us, right? So davening is the kind of thing that if you want to do it, you value it, you want to practice this discipline known as davening, then what you have to do is do it. And do it badly, and do it stupidly, and do it half mindfully, and do it however you want, just do it. And the more you do it, the easier it will become if that's what you value and that's what you want to pursue. If it's like I get bored, my brain drifts off, I forget what I was up to, I'm just desperate to stop already, I need to do something else. Okay, the more you do it, the more you practice it, the easier it's going to become. Like any other discipline you practice, that aspect of it, right? The habitual doing it daily to create a habit, to get your brain used to it. The only way to do it is to do it if that's what you value and that's super important to you. Because I don't know, right now, maybe like not murdering your stepsister is way more important. Like, I don't know you, but you know.
Right.
Okay.
So in terms of her last question, I think this is a magnificent answer, and I can't believe I've never heard the story from you.
You never heard the story?
Never. Other than religiously, is there any point in trying to fix this? Meaning to say, is there a psychological benefit to her fixing this? That's what she's curious about.
So from the psychological perspective, if it's something that makes you feel incomplete, if you feel like you're doing something wrong, if there's Mr. Guilt talking to you every day long, and no matter what you do right in that day, Mr. Guilt's like, yeah, but you didn't daven, right? And even if Mr. Guilt talks like Kohn from the 5th grade, whatever it is, if Mr. Guilt's talking to you and you don't feel complete, then yes, there's a psychological benefit in addressing it. If you're totally fine, then from a psychological perspective, maybe not. From a religious perspective, you know, there would be those who would say that the more difficult it is for you to daven, the more precious those feelings are to Hashem. I will say that my whole life, again, I'm being very mindful about my mother. My whole life, my mother was not like the world. You didn't see her all day long with a tehillim, but all she did was talk to Hashem all day long. She'd like literally be like washing dishes and say, Hashem, I don't understand. How am I supposed to do this today? And this is happening. And Hashem, it has to work out. Like all day long, my mother was in constant dialogue with Hashem. So you can do that. That's also davening. I remember my mother once saying to me when she was in the hospital recently, and she said to me, she's like, I'm such a bad person. I never davened enough. My mother used to daven all the time. And I don't sit. My mother used to sit and say Tehillim all day long, and I don't do that. And I said to her, Mommy, all you do is talk to Hashem. Like you daven, your life is davening from the morning till the night. All you ever do is talk to Hashem. So I think you're good. You know, ironically, now that she's in her wheelchair, she sits and says Tehillim all day long because I think it's what she can do. So.
And you know what? Different people at different stages, it will bring them joy in different ways. Okay. Oh, we're going to run out of time. Let's try to see what else we can cover. This is the first year we're making Pesach without my mother. I'm so resentful of my mother for dying as I clean, which makes no sense, but I really hate her for dying.
So first of all, you're 100% right. Mother should not die. That was like very wrong.
We discussed that.
Right?
And the Links group, by the way, on the chat one time just said that they're going to set protocols that they're going to give to parents before they have children of when and which month, if a parent has to die, is okay. So the first thing they said is not Nisan and not Tishrei.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Not Yom Tov. Also not Kislev because Hanukkah is not pleasant, and also not Adar because we don't die.
Right. Losing your father Adar is not. I don't recommend it.
Okay. They said summer is ridiculous because yahrzeit in camp is the worst, and grieving in camp. No, this doesn't work. So 2 months of summer are out also.
Right.
Shavuos Sivan also out. They whittled it down. Basically, of course, they knocked out every month of the year, and they said, and that's the point. That's why parents are not allowed to die.
Right. So February 29th on a leap year. Maybe it works out that there's one day that if you absolutely have to die, but no, parents should not die. Of course you're mad at her. Like what's that poem about, it's by A.A. Milne about the boy, and he tells his mother that she should not go down to the edge of town if she doesn't go with him, and then she goes down to the edge of town and she gets lost, and it's like, excuse me, you don't leave me. This is not okay, right? Because parents should not die. Of course you're mad at your mother. That's totally and completely normal. That sensation will pass. Talk to her inside your brain. Have a conversation with her. Yell at her. Be like, Mommy, you should not have died. This was really mean of you. Like, you left me with all this Pesach stuff to do. And I'm like, by the way, like, you have some nerve. Tell her how you feel, right? Yeah. Eventually that anger will pass. It's one of the stages of grieving. It is normal. Being resentful of the person who died, it's kind of like par for the course. Like, you know, we wonder if you don't go through that stage at some point. That being said, the only thing I can really say is it will go, but you have every right to give yourself permission to be mad at your mother. You know, whether you literally need to set up an empty chair the way we do in Gestalt therapy and talk to your mother and tell her all the reasons why she was terrible for dying, or whether you want to do that in your head, or whether you just want to give yourself permission that I'm allowed to be angry at my mother, right? All of those things are fine. That it will go though. It's part of processing your grief.
Got it. Okay, let's try to see how many more questions we can get. I had my Pesach plans canceled. My father is an absolute hoarder. The house is a disaster zone. I am so overwhelmed with the idea of cleaning for Pesach, and he is of no help now. How do I get past being frozen and anxious and actually get the job done?
Wow, I think we're all in that boat, right? Everybody is feeling that way, whether you were supposed to stay home for Pesach, but now you have your children home and you can't clean, or whatever is going on. To a certain extent, like, so first of all, we don't really know, like, what an absolute hoarder means. We don't really know, right, any of that kind of stuff. Right. And we don't know how functional this father is. Like, is this a conversation that you and your father can have about, like, so practically speaking, how is Pesach happening, right? You're the child situation, you're not his wife. So ultimately, it's his job to make sure Pesach happens. If he's not going to physically help, then he has to figure out a way to mobilize your siblings to help. There are cleaning services, I keep getting, and again, depends how safe you feel about bringing other people in your home. There are cleaning services that will come into your house and clean your whole house in a day. There's a few companies that do like sanitizing, where they sanitize, so it's legal, and then they also will Pesach clean at the same time. You can, of course, talk to your Rav about, like, doing the bare minimum, and you can buy all the food if you need to. Like, there are options, but you have to sit down with your father and show him the calendar. If he's that type who's maybe not so okay, show him the calendar and be like, okay, this is how many days we have left. This is how many days it usually takes to clean any given room. Hour by hour, this isn't going to work. Dad, what's your plan? Tati, what are you doing? Like, what do you want to do? Because something has to be done. And if he's really, really, really not capable, and he's really not in reality, maybe he's so frozen in his own grief, maybe he's not well, himself psychologically, then you have to make a decision that ultimately this isn't really your responsibility. Do the bare minimum, and that's it. Because doing the bare minimum is going to undo some of that frozenness, because don't think of it as this gigantic job. Also in general, right? How do you run a marathon? One step at a time, right? How do you do anything? When I was in grad school, there was a lady, I just never forgot her because it was so brilliant what she said. She came in and she was giving she was applying for a professorship. So what they do is they have them give a talk, and then the graduate students can vote on it. So they talk to the grad students about their career. So this woman was in her early 30s, and she had written 12 really well-respected books that are the kind of books that you're never going to see in a bookstore, but if you're in the field, you need her books. And I said to her, wow, how are you so prolific? You're 33, and you've written 12 books, and that's amazing. How'd you do it? So she said, I'll tell you why. You never start writing a book. She's like, you ever wrote a paper? So I said, yeah. So she's like, how many papers have you written in your graduate career? I don't know, 100. So she said, right, a book is, let's say, 9 to 12 chapters. That's 9 to 12 papers. And a paper is written page by page. So don't write a book, write a page, then write a paper. Then next thing you know, you've written 12 books, right? Amazing. It's the same thing. Don't clean your whole house for Pesach. Clean your bedroom. Clean one shelf in the kitchen, right? Don't try, because if you're going to have to clean the house for Pesach the way Mommy did it, then, and deal with Tati's hoarding and all that kind of stuff, it's never going to happen, so don't. Right? And like I said, outsource, get help, get your father to mobilize the siblings. If you have to order every single drop of food, figure it out in that sense, but don't make the job bigger than it has to be, because then you'll never do it. It's true.
Got it. Okay. I'm trying, I keep losing the list of questions. It keeps closing on me in between. I'm not sure if there was something that we didn't cover, that, because there are a lot that are similar in nature. Right. Like one who says, I was doing fine till now, but as more people are closer to home, are getting sick, I'm getting very anxious. How do I deal with anxiety? Right. Normally I deal with it by going out. This one actually we didn't do so much. Normally I would deal with it by going out or talking about it, but there's no one to talk to about it because everyone is anxious. So basically she feels like it's contagion.
Right. Although, I'll say in Hebrew, tsaras rabim chatzi nechama, right? So to a certain extent, the fact that we're all anxious doesn't mean that we can't be of support to one another. I'm doing my level best to be of support to everybody listening to this. I am anxious, right? We're all anxious. I'm sure you're anxious too, right? So just because your friends are anxious doesn't mean you can't talk to them about it, because sometimes someone's having a strong day and she's having a day where, I hate that word strong, but you know what I mean, just having that day where she's okay right now and she can support you, and then in 2 weeks you're going to be supporting her. There's nothing wrong with talking. There's nothing wrong with talking to a friend about the price of tea in China, right? just talking to people takes away some of our stress and our anxiety. The fact is, yes, to a certain extent, there's this gigantic monster looming, and as long as the gigantic monster was looming, but it was far away, it was one thing. When the gigantic monster moves into your backyard, you start getting scared, right? So, and we, as people who have been through loss, we know that sometimes the worst outcome really does happen. It's realistic. Like the big, huge monster comes into our house. We've seen it. He's been there before. So yeah, you're getting more anxious because like he's moved into your town. So it's scary, but at the same token, you can still cope with your anxiety by talking to your friends, by doing any of your other coping tools, and by accepting. At the beginning, someone had put in a comment, it was somebody, Rachel, I don't remember her last name, where she said, how can you be so cavalier about it? It's not really about being cavalier about it, right? It's about accepting that we can only control the controllable and not letting our brain put us on that treadmill of like, but what if, but what if, but what if, but what if? Because but what if we can't control? But we could control this hour, this thought, this moment, right? That's what we can control. So it's not about being cavalier, because cavalier is not psychologically healthy, but it's about saying, you know what? Me worrying about this for the next 16 hours is not going to get me